Hi, my name is Peter. I'm a technical director at Virtuos Warsaw, and it seems like clickbait titles don't work because there are not so many of you. Anyway, let's go. So today I will talk about my managing experience in game dev. I will start with introduction and explaining why you shouldn't leave right now, probably. Then we'll go for prerequisites, what it takes to become a manager in game dev and how to actually become one. We'll go about main goals of you as a manager. I'll talk about difference of experience of outsource versus in-house. Then we'll take upon a hot topic of hiring and firing. We'll discuss different types of communication that you need to do as a manager. We'll discuss such hot topics as promotion, grading, values, and last but not least, I will tell you how not to die being a manager. Anyway, let's start with an introduction, aka who am I to freaking lecture me? So our marketing team was no joy, so they asked me to remove the freaking part. Anyway, so I worked on those titles, as a graphics programmer mainly. I have about 3 years combined as a lead or technical director, both in-house and in outsource. So while being in Virtuos Warsaw, we shipped a number of rendering features that we cannot unfortunately talk about. We hired about 10 engineers and 2 TAs. We hired more TAs, but that wasn't done by me. And nobody left us thus far, and that didn't age that well for this presentation. Okay, so the inspirations for this talk. So there are two main sources that I kind of used as a guide. So first, I really love this book by Patty Azzarella. So the non-technical part of this talk is mainly like inspired by it. I agree with about 90% of what she writes, which is quite a bit. And second, there is this blog post that you can only found in Blog Archive, which describes the technical part of this talk, particularly the technical interview. And it was creating butthurt back then in 2007, and it still creates a butthurt. Anyway, what is my motivation for this talk? So one point is missing. So just Radek last time asked me to make a talk. So sorry, Radek, I guess that's not the talk that you expected. So I thought there is not enough talk about leadership. And then I took a look at GIC program. Well, maybe in tech specifically, there are not enough talks. Well, okay. Well, I mean, it's time to leave for you now, I guess. Anyway, few disclaimers before we start. First, it's obviously like personal opinion, based on personal opinions and experience. So your mileage may vary. I try to keep it as agnostic as possible, but we will have like a section where we discuss difference because there are certain differences between in-house experience and outsource. And last but not least, it might or even should provoke some serious disagreement and butthurt, especially some points. So if you're ready, fasten your seatbelts and let's take off. Anyway, so let's start with prerequisites. To justify clickbaity title of this talk, let's talk about them now. So I firmly believe there are three things that make you that are necessary and enough to be a manager. So first is knowing your domain. You don't have to be like the smartest person on your team or in the room, but you should know it at least at solid senior level so you know what you're talking about. Here's a quote by Elon Musk, which I mostly agree with. So it's kind of like managers, at least in the past, must write great software, or it's like being a cavalry captain who doesn't ride a horse. Well, I mean, modern cavalry captains ride tanks, but I guess you get the idea. Second is, and a very important point for me is actually wanting to do this job, because what you need to realize, this is a completely different job from engineering job. And that is not always taken as a given, because you think that this is just a next step, like in you being promoted to first from junior to senior, then to a lead, and this is, but no, this is like, this changes what you do on a daily basis. And there are all, those horrible ideas out there. Best leaders are not the ones, are ones who don't want to lead. The best leaders tend to be the ones who didn't want the job in the first place. The best leaders are the reluctant ones. Well, what I suggest to people who believe in that is replace leader with engineer or coder. And then try to think if you want to actually hire this person. So best coders are the ones who don't want to code. Do you want to fire this coder? Probably not. So being a leader, being in management position, it's a job like any other job. It's a different job, but it's still a job. So you'd better actually like to have it. Otherwise, you won't be doing it. And last one, but not least, that justifies the name of this talk, don't be an asshole. What do I mean? There is another bad quote, most effective leaders are jerks. And in my opinion, there is certain like perception like that, or in order to be a leader, sometimes like you need to make a popular decision, etc. So this knowledge, in my opinion, comes from two things. From bad communication, basically when you make some decisions and you don't communicate to your team why you actually did it, and from wrong motivation from the decision. We'll talk about this later on. So how to become a manager? So something that Marcin earlier took upon in his great talk this afternoon. But I have a little bit different advices. So universal advice that I got from Patty Azzarello book, and I strongly believe, is just as for any job, any promotion, you first start doing a job and then you get promoted to it. So the other thing that I want to consider, to be completely open, is can you get into managing position by changing jobs? Yes and no. I would say it's not as clear cut as getting your salary increased. Because if you want to get your salary increased, change your job. That is like nobody can object that. In 2024, that's like a universal a universal advice. It doesn't work any other way around. So I would say that there are two cases where actually it could work. It might be that in your particular organization you don't have any path forward. Basically, all positions up are taken, and they don't expect growth in your team. In which case they just don't need another lead. Another idea is basically maybe the other another idea from Patty Azzarello's book is that sometimes to reach your particular goal, you need to sacrifice something else. So yeah, that was a good Freudian slip. So basically, maybe you want at least temporarily to go to a company where your level of expertise and experience will give you a lead position. That could be an option. Then what can you actually start doing to get promoted? First, there are like organizational coordination tasks. Some companies have this coordinator position. So that is a good avenue for becoming a lead. Engage more in communication, because as a manager, you will have to do a lot of communication, both inside the team and outside the team. We'll talk about it later. And mentoring. Basically, as a senior team member, in some places, you are expected, actually, even if you are not a lead, you're just a senior, you're expected to mentor more junior team members. And thing is, all those things you can later on put on your resume, and then you can argue that you have those prerequisites to become a manager or a lead. So main goals, this is not a very good category. I tried to structurize my brain dump as much as I could, but didn't work always well. So thing is that I want to talk about is manager place in the hierarchy. So there is like this intuitive approach that there is like some vertical, and you actually care about who supervises whom. So there is a director on top. There are, to him, some lead engineers report, and each lead engineer has their individual contributor team. I don't think that this way of thinking is constructive. I prefer the other way of thinking. I prefer the approach when you the approach to the hierarchy when you think who serves whom. So basically, like the most important in that approach is actually your client, which might be which doesn't matter like if you're in-house or outsource, because in case of outsource, this is basically like an outside company. In the case of in-house, that might be another team. For instance, if you're doing graphics programming, then the art team is your client, or some stakeholder in the art team is your client. Then the next important agent here is the team, because the team will do the job for the client and either earn money directly or produce produce necessary thing to your to ship your game, produce necessary tech. And then at the very end of it, there is manager and back office, whose role is to support your team and enable them to actually do the job. So that way of thinking actually like a little bit should ground you, I guess, and basically we will touch upon it to stress that your team is actually like the most important part of it. The other like random thought, what is, as a manager, what is the most important question you have to answer to your team? And let's put it just as straightforward as possible. I like to formulate it, what should I do as an individual contributor or as basically as a report to earn more money? And basically, your answer usually is twofold. It's either you want this person to take more responsibility, or you want them to become more proficient in what they are already doing, or both. But as a lead, you just need to specify that and quantify it. And the thing is, if people realize that they are not gonna get any promotion, they will just leave to where they pay more. And you need to set clear expectations. You need like to basically put this carrot on a stick before the cart, if I'm being cynical. Now let's talk about differences between outsource and in-house. And in my opinion, there are not that many, but still there are some, so that you understand what could be my presuppositions that don't work in your particular case. So first one is seniority level. Basically, if you work on a AAA, in a AAA company, usually you will have, as a rule of thumb, you will have more senior team that requires less supervision. So that means that you will spend less time on educating, mentoring people, and more time on actually on other activities as a lead, as there are many, and maybe you'll have more time to actually do the coding. Second, in outsource, there are some business-oriented tasks that you will have to do. So at the very least, you will be involved in technical sale part, where you will need to explain to the client how they will benefit from what you do, and you will be writing proposals. Hopefully not the full-fledged ones, but the technical part of it. But thing is, in an in-house company, you actually, as a senior, you will do a very similar job, because you do you do have to sell the feature. Like for instance, as a senior or as a lead, your responsibility is to identify what is missing for the project, and then basically explain to the stakeholders that it's needed to be spent resources on. So it's no different like from that perspective. The only difference is that in that case there is no like real money that you will touch. The other thing different is it's closer to like to actual money, and it's something that I enjoy because very often when you work on something, especially on some R&D topics, you're like asking yourself, well, actually what I really like, we spent half a year like developing that very nice rendering feature. Was it really worth it? And to be honest, like it's very hard to answer because like nobody knows. When you ship a game, you can't quantify like that this game sold extra 100,000 copies because there was this advanced lighting technique there. You never know. While in outsource, you basically have money as a universal measurement of the worth of your job. If somebody pays for it, it's worth it. And then finally, like the difference obviously is client. It's either you have internal content creator or external stakeholder, but there is actually like there is less difference that you might think there is. And finally, there is production overhead that you hopefully will not get involved in, but I tend to hear a bit more than everywhere, and that's why there are quite a few more people involved in an outsourced project. Anyway, now let's get to the most hot topic, hiring, which is based on that wonderful article. So let's start first with soft things, working with recruiters. So basically, this is very important that you set up your relationship with recruiters, and that your processes are good. So first, recruiters are the people who are ultimately accountable for the whole process of hiring a candidate. For instance, in some companies, I've seen how a candidate would be forgotten in the middle of the process. This is a huge red flag. Basically, if that happens, you should immediately escalate it like to their supervisor, because this is just not acceptable. You put like company put effort in finding, sourcing that candidate, and then he is abandoned for no good reason. I guess everybody was through that at some point. Second, job description. A lot of times recruiters want you to create a wall of text, and of course you can use your favorite chat GPT, and it helps. They don't really care as long as there is some content there. But I prefer to make it as minimalistic as as it should be. I mean, don't put there like 5 shipped AAA projects unless you really mean it. Like, what does it change if he shipped like 5, 2, or 1 AAA project? Like, or don't put every buzzword, technological buzzword that you like as hard requirement, because I mean you're misinforming at the end of the day. And the thing that I really believe in, I really hate the years of experience in something like in game dev, in technology A, B, C, because this is a lazy thing to do job description. Years of experience don't mean a crap. Like, you are interested in a person having actual skills, the actual knowledge, and not how many times he came to the office and drink a cup of coffee while working on it. So instead of saying like 2 years in experience, think about what kind of job do you want them to do. For instance, you have a lot of crashes, right? Knows how to analyze crash dumps in NVIDIA Aftermath. If you have lots of crashes on PC on an NVIDIA platform, for instance. Yes, that will take you a little bit more mental effort, and it doesn't actually work all the time. This is something from the actual job posting that we have on our website. So what can I say? I can only quote Alistair Thorne from Game of Thrones. Sometimes you really lose your fight with recruiters. Anyway, what do recruiters do? They don't do technical interview. They don't ask technical questions. Please don't. Like, it never works. What they do initial soft skill pre-filtering. And believe me, I learned it the hard way. If a recruiter says that you really, really, absolutely don't want to talk to this candidate, then you don't. There are very, very, very weird people out there, and I learned it the hard way. Anyway, let's talk about interview steps. And the main idea, I didn't find a better GIF, basically, is funneling. You want to create a funnel that as early as possible filters as many candidates as possible because you want to save time. So these gentlemen have found a very nice way to sort oranges, so be like them. So basically, like, you want to save your interviewers' time, you want to save candidates' time, so you want to maximize ultimately rejection rate at each step. You want to minimize time and effort both for you and the interviewee, and you want to make as few steps as possible because nobody loves like to waste time on interviews, but not fewer than that. And basically, first thing you want to spend some time is talking to the recruiter and help train their AI in their brain so that they kind of like can do some CV pre-filtering. After a certain point of time, they will be able to recognize like relevant candidates. As we said before, recruiters only check the soft skills. Don't, like, even if they ask, can you create like a technical question? No, they don't ask technical questions, period. So then, like in my experience, 3 stages are like necessary and sufficient. So, and you can argue about the order. The way we arrived at is technical test, might be first, and then technical screening, and finally a technical interview. So let's talk about all of them. So first, why is why do I make this claim? So first, there is like an empirical evidence. Basically, this process follows closely that blast from the past article, and it was written based on the experience some top technical game dev studios do it. So that somehow works for them, somehow works for us. Second claim, there is almost binary division between good and bad programmers. So there is no point of asking hard questions because bad programmers don't answer simple questions. So why would you ask hard questions? Third claim is what I want to check is that a person has solid knowledge that is expected to be taught in university. School here is used in the American way, meaning like university. So basically, there are 2 things why this is important. First, you actually you want to speak with a person the same language and same terms and be sure you understand them the same way. Second, I don't know, it depends, like if you can afford it, if you can afford having interns, that's fine. But in my experience, if you need stuff to be done, you can't afford teaching basics to people. So sorry, I mean, it doesn't mean you have to go to university, but you have to know the university program one way or another. I don't really care if you went and spent like 4, 5, 6 years in a top university, or if you're self-taught. Good on you. Like really, apart from immigration officers, nobody cares about it. Why is it so important? Thing is, bad code has a tremendous effect on your project, much more than the bad art. I mean, if you have like bad concept art or bad content, you can just remove it and redo it. If there is some bad code early on in the project and there was content produced on it that depends on it, then you will have a very hard time. First, like there could be code interdependencies on that, then you might need to redo the content. it just has like, it just may end up really badly for you later on. The other thing why the interview process is like that is that you want, like programmers are usually not the people with the best presenting skills and not the people with the best social skills. Let's be honest, okay? But some people are, and you want to avoid, especially if you're interviewing somebody for an IC position, you want to avoid discriminating people by their, like by how well they write their resume or how well they can present what they've done. And that is why you need to focus more, and more on that later, on asking concrete questions. So let's go for it. So first stage is the technical test. I'll say like that. It's don't do it, don't make it more than 2 or 3 hours at the most, because unless you want to hire juniors only. Because imagine you're a senior guy, like you are, I don't know, 30 years old. You don't have 20, 40 hours to complete a test unless you really, really, absolutely want this job. And you want potentially to poach people from other studios. So, and you want to poach people who are already working. So don't make it any longer. Second, invest time into making your technical test. Please don't do the test like, oh, write your own game of chess or something. That is no fun. I mean, and expect that you will, while designing your technical test, you will invest at least 3 times as much time as the person who will be doing it, because you want it to be clear, you want it to be very very straightforward, you want no miscommunication. And yeah, 2024 update, and the reason why we changed our technical test, check it against Chat GPT. So for instance, things like find how much each word is found in this text. Yeah, like Chat GPT can write that already. Well, it makes some mistakes, especially in the free version. It makes it suboptimal, so you can still recognize it, but yeah, it doesn't work. And aim for a technical test to be super easy to check, especially if that is your first, basically like if it's your first stage, like maximum 5 minutes, because if you have several candidates, like you don't want to check every test like half an hour or like never come back to it. One thing that I forgot to put on the slide, once you did a technical test, give it to every engineer who are reporting to you, and check if they understand the assignment and if actually they can do it. The other thing, try to minimize dependencies. Don't rely on some weird libraries or setup, because you don't want to have conversation with candidate, or when they send you their code, how to resolve like those external DLLs or something like that. Try to keep it as dependentless as possible. And ideally, it should be something relevant that actually checks the skills that you're aiming for. So let me brag about the technical test we came up with. It's about 15 minutes to do, but terms and condition if you actually know what you're doing. It's about 5 lines of code to write. And we basically, like, it's math heavy, but we give at this point, maybe we'll not in the future, all the math that is needed. We give it away like as a take home, so there is no rush, which I really love. We use Shader Toy, and so it eliminates dependencies because it works everywhere, but the thing is it doesn't work all the time, so every time I want to check it, Shader Toy is down. The other thing is it's very nice visual cue, so you can test it if it actually works or not. And it's an actual issue that we had on a project that we couldn't check this time. Actually, it's simplified case, of course, basically, and finally, it's still an issue at UE5. So basically, if you take a capsule light on UE5, place it very close to the ground, then you have those highlights here, and here's the result. So we give you all the math, how to get this one and be better than UE5. So it shows that you can understand the basic mathematics and can turn it into shader code. Um, I'm fine if people don't use, I don't know, you need to do integration there, so I'm fine if people use Wolfram Alpha, ChatGPT, whatever, to get the job done. And it's for most people, at least, or they were trying to please me and say it was fun for them. Hopefully, we'll make a talk sometime in the future, and then we'll remove the math hint portion there and we'll just redirect to the talk. Well, maybe we'll make a talk if I have time. Anyway. Then this will be a talk that you, Radek, will appreciate finally. Anyway, screening. So screening is 15 minutes long, basic questions only. And the thing is that I'm looking at person more for person understanding than actual knowledge. And for each question, I ask why is it that way? And I strive to get, like, if the person just learned the that's like the best. Okay. Okay, that should be a bit more clear to hear. Basically, the passing condition for this test is okay to fail one question. So the structure of this screening is that every question covers one basic area. So there is a math question, C++, data structure, low level, and the main specific question. I will give you my graphics question. Of course, if you are hiring, this is something that we added because we figure out there are sometimes juniors that know very well like those first four areas, but know nothing about graphics. And of course, if you are hiring like AI programmers or gameplay programmers, you will need to replace the last section, but I don't know anything about gameplay programming, so I can't help you here. So there is an extra question, number one. It's how much is 2 to the power of 8? And basically, if you know, you know. It's a very hidden tribute to certain studios that still ask it. I really love it, and it gives you an overall feel how the how the conversation will go. And actually, it tells you if a candidate actually worked with on a low level, if they were encoding something in a in a byte or something, if they know how many numbers you can represent with 1 byte. Yeah. Then for math, I mean, dot and cross product, like, oh yeah, of course, everybody knows it. You will be, as soon as you start interviewing people, you will be surprised how good is it to just like as a screening question. I'm depressed and fascinated at the same time. So basically, you want to ask a lot of like kind of follow-up questions on actual understanding, how to calculate it, what is it used for, what's the geometry meaning, and again, you want to look for how it works and how it's used, not just like a textbook definition. And yeah, if somebody doesn't know what dot product is, I don't want them to write any shader code. I mean, this is just dangerous. For C++, classic virtual function, or like when I'm being tired of it, I am asking something like malloc versus new. In that case, I will also follow up with placement new. In virtual function, you want to ask all the nitty-gritty details of what is virtual pointer, virtual table, and overheads, because in graphics, you want to write very optimal code. And here you also look for understanding how things work under the hood. Okay, for data structures and algorithms, just basically pick your favorite data structure. Ask what is the asymptotic complexities for worst-based cases for typical operation. Ask about like their practical use. What is the memory footprint? What is the cache friendliness? My favorite part here is like you take a hash table, And of course, it has the best like average complexities of all structures. And then you ask, why don't you use hash table everywhere? So this is where like memory footprint comes into play, and being it sparse enough to actually work effectively, and so on and so forth. Basically, like since you have 5 questions, you have more or less 3 minutes for each question. But usually, first 10 seconds, you understand which level the conversation will be kind of on. Bits and bytes. This is actually the most popular question that is not getting answered for some unknown reason, and it's not getting answered even for people who had like A+ on the assembly classes, which makes me. I mean, I don't know what else then do you teach as assembly. Really scary about the university level. Anyway, I stopped. What is it? Waving my fist at the clouds and university education. So basically, there are 2 variations of essentially the same question. You can either ask how negative essentially numbers are represented as integer, or you can ask about int versus float. And the way you ask it is you ask about range and precision, and basically you want to see if a person really understands when you should use one or another, because in graphics, a lot of times, you want to pack the data as tight as possible, pass it to GPU, and then pack. And if you don't know that, you have no idea, like you don't have prerequisite even to approach this task. So basically, you also look for a mindset for a person if they are ready to write like super optimized code, because in games we want to write super optimized code. And then the main specific questions, basically, as I said, difference for every specialization. I enjoy asking like super basic ones, like how to map a normal map. I like to ask about bottlenecks for a very simple case. I don't know, like full screen post-process, what could be them. And I like to, or like you can ask graphics pipeline stages. You got the idea. It's kind of like open-ended and at the same time basic. Now, technical interview. So technical interview is usually the last stage, and I prefer having 1 hour for it. And you want to have at least one wingman for that, because very often you want to have a second opinion. So take your most senior guy, basically, or if you have a big company, have several teams that do interviews. So the way I structure it is, first I do a CV overview, but a bit later on that. Then there will be some technical question, and always leave like 5-10 minutes for Q&A to turn the table and let candidate ask you, basically make it as fair as possible. So, okay, there we go again. Let's start off what not to ask on the technical interview. Brain teasers. I mean, please, I've seen this problem about dropping 2 glasses from 120-story building like multiple times. It was glasses, Xbox dev kits, and vodka bottles all the times. And think about brain teasers. They actually like, they check your, of all things, they check your, how well read you are, basically, because very often you either know how to solve it or not, and it doesn't have stronger correlation with solving real problems, just like as an IQ test. I mean, at this point, you can just as well just give them an IQ test and be done with it. Don't waste your time. Don't ask very specific technical details, but there will be an exception to this. I mean, what is like? It's kind of the same. Like, if you ask what is the wavefront size on GCN architecture, either a person knows it or he doesn't know. And it doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't tell you whether he is able to connect dots, whether he is able to think. It's just basically his how much he read, maybe like some experience-based questions. Yeah, don't ask, do you know I don't know, given technology, because how are you gonna verify it? I mean, they say yes, and then what? So now let's talk about constructively, what to ask. More basic questions. Basic questions are always great. I mean, you can't go wrong. Open-ended questions. So focus not on the knowledge itself, but basically on abilities, on ability of the person to figure it out. And it's more important that I really love it when somebody doesn't know it, but given hints, is able to figure it out. So there are a couple of questions I really love: the depth test question for graphics and the MIP mapping, because there is a lot of depth into those questions, and you can touch many different projects. And or you can just take a particular problem, and I guess in big tech this is called what is it, design interviews. So if you want to use a fancy term, let's say design interview questions. And now the exception for the specific questions. Treat CV bullet points. I mean, don't get impressed by somebody's CVs. The way you interpret somebody's CVs is basically whatever somebody puts on their CV makes it a fair game for you to ask specific questions about it. So if they say, oh, normally I would not ask, like, I don't know, recent graduates what is an ESRAM, because, I mean, what the hell, how would they know? But if he's put on his CV that he's got like Xbox One optimization, if he's Xbox One optimization guru for the GPU, I will of course ask him about what is the ESRAM, how to, what are the strategies to allocate it, what do you put in there, and so on and so forth. I mean, I also, basically you can also ask a person to take one highlight, like the best, what they really loved in their career, they're most proud of, and start asking very specific questions about it if you know something about it, and then you can verify, basically find, the approach here is like you find an area where a person believes he knows something, and you check it. And again, figuring out is more important than knowing. So that's why it's okay to give tips, and that's why you always want to ask why. For instance, like with the depth, with MIP mapping, a lot of people will say, oh yeah, we'll select the MIP mapping level based on how far away like the triangle is from the camera, and you're like, why? You give them an example when it doesn't work that make them thinking, and they're like, aha, probably it's not the depth. And you're like, yeah, what are you actually trying to optimize? And if you give them the hints and they solve it, it's even better if if they knew it from the first place. Thing is that why all that fuss? Why are we torturing people like that? It's because I strongly believe, and this is in graphics as well as actually in any other game dev. You have, as a programmer, you have a responsibility for every line of code written. And you need to know exactly why certain optimization worked or not. So you really don't want someone who is guessing what they're writing. Since we talked about hiring, let's talk about firing. So why do you fire people? So first reason, we're not going to touch serious misconduct. It's an HR topic, like outside of the scope of this talk. One single reason is insufficient performance. There could be like different reasons for that. They could have lost motivation. They could have, they can have bad attitude, low skill. Doesn't matter. If somebody doesn't perform well enough, there is, unfortunately, there is no way forward. You never fire people because you don't like them. I mean, because it very well might be that the problem is with you and not them. And the other framework that I like to think about, it's like Netflix framework. It's like your workplace is not a family, but treat it as a sports team. So you can still be friends at work, like as football players are friends between each other. But it's okay if, for instance, top players leave your team and join other team, Or if you don't extend the contract with a football player that doesn't perform, you put him in a reserve, etc. He sits there for the whole season. They don't improve. You let them go. That's okay for the sports team. So I try to operate using this analogy. Why is it important? I mean, there is so-called, it's a bit cynical, but it's a good analogy, rotten apples theory. So basically, if somebody is underperforming and they're still there, they're still getting their paycheck, then other people start thinking, so they don't have to do their job to collect their paycheck, so why should I? And this really diseases. So basically one bad employee can spoil like the whole team. And the other thing is, in the end of the day, you have that many resources to complete your job. And if at least one of them is underperforming, that this increases the workload on others. So you need, at the end of the day, you need the work to be done. So do you give a second chance? Also called, like most companies, performance improvement plan. It depends on your company's policy, I guess. I mean, it's ethically right thing to do. In my experience, never worked. So take it like up to you. Communications. So you have several, as a lead, you need to do several types of communication. First, as external, you want to improve the visibility of your team. You want to broadcast your successes and your needs to get the resources for the teams that you want. Then you need to resolve blockers with other teams, and there could be very different kinds of them. Then internal, you want to keep your team informed. And my rule of thumb is you want to give as much information as you could. Basically, whatever you know, spread it to the team unless you absolutely cannot. So you want to explain them what are the global goals, what is like, where are you moving for, explain your decisions, so basically they understand what you did and why. You want to celebrate the good news if the team achieved something, and for the bad news, they will know it anyway, so it better come from you, not from somebody else. For feedback, it's universal truth, but you will be surprised how you perceive it differently when your supervisor praise publicly and praise people often. When you praise people, you don't feel how it works, but try to think about times when you were praised and how you felt about it. It's just like magical. It's like free resource that you get. Criticize people privately. Don't say to somebody that his work sucks like in front of the whole team. I mean, should be obvious. One-on-ones. So basically treat it as a space for your team member to talk to you. It's their time. It's not like the focus is their needs, not your needs. It could be any topic, even if it's not work related. And I heard one time like, oh, somebody was wasting his lead's time at a one-on-one. That is not physically possible. This is like their place. Your report cannot waste their time. If they want to talk to you like about their personal crisis or something, I mean, you'll have to, like, that's their right. And that's not, don't treat it as a space as discuss your day-to-day kind of tasks. If you need it, organize another meeting for that. So treat it as a valuable source of feedback. A lot of times, like, people won't tell you something unless you specifically ask for it, and sometimes you can be surprised. So you, as a manager, your responsibility is to collect it, because you have an overview of multiple people. You can identify if more than one person says you about something, then more probable than not, you need to pass it upstairs, because probably that's a very real problem. And have them regularly, and well, I mean, I'm not really good at it lately. Anyway, team management. I'll quickly go about like grading structure we have at Virtuos. So we don't have mid-level or specialists. We have seniors and juniors, but those are split. We have open requirements for all the levels, and basically all levels, they need to know the basics, the technical basics. They need to be able to propose solutions for problems. They might not be the right solutions, but anyway, they can. They need to be able to execute tasks when given instructions, and so those applies to both seniors and juniors. On top of that, seniors need to know how to solve problems. They need to be able to handle really big features. And in case of Virtuos, we require them to be able to mentor juniors. And we have an internal grading system. It's based on shipped projects and features. And we have this nice skill matrix that I graciously stole from another studio inside Virtuos. Thank you, Pascal. Promotions. Basically, try to be proactive in it and do it before it's too late and person leaves. And very important, celebrate it publicly, and because you need to impress on your team what people need to do to get promoted. I mean, and this is like a good news. Why hide it? And promotion always should come with a salary raise. I mean, I thought it's obvious, but anyway. And then never ever, just as with job description, grade people based on years of experience. Don't be lazy. I mean, years of experience don't say anything. There are people who were there hanging for 10 years. There are people who progressed like crazy in just 2 years. Define competency that you need, not time spent on abusing the coffee machine. Next, probably, hopefully, will cause some bad hurt. Hot take on values. So a lot of studios declare values. It doesn't work. I don't think it works. First is they are all freaking same. We want to be humble. We want to be proactive. Player first. I mean, there is not a single value that somebody will disagree. The other thing is, if you adhere to the values, there is no need to write them. I mean, it's already there. And if you don't, writing them won't make people follow them. So, and another thing, the only thing that that writing down values help is weaponizing them. Basically, like I had this discussion with a colleague of mine that had values in his studio, and I was like, well, it's useless. He has, well, I had this argument with a level artist, and I pointed his nose into the values, and I proved that I was right, and he was wrong. And I was like, and did anything changed about it? He was like, no, but I proved that I was right. So not too much value for me in that personally, but maybe made him feel good. Anyway, we're closing in. Survival tips. Hot topic, like, do you need to code as a manager? My rule of thumb: if you can code so you don't lose the skill, but remember that that you're a manager, and if there are like some unfinished business and you're coding, you shouldn't. You should finish your management tasks. And how not to get swamped, basically. So there is a balance, basically. There are two basically polar ways to treat something. You can try to fix everything, or you can try to say that everything outside of your domain is not your job. So I use several maxims sort of like to self-navigate, so hopefully you'll find them useful. First, if it's for your team member, you do it. If, for instance, your HR department doesn't do their immigration papers, you will lose this team member. And second, this team member, if you help them, like if you poke your HRs and make them do their job, they will remember that you were standing for them, and that will be priceless. And also remember that your relationship with your team is more important than with your boss, because your team is the one who is doing your job, And if your boss doesn't like you, yeah, you might not get the promotion, but if you get your job done, it's getting noticed. And in the end of the day, that's what gets counted. And if it's not appreciated in this company, it will be visible from another. The other maxim that I used is, if something is critical, fix it but then escalate. So do something that is not your job, and then escalate it to a supervisor of whoever doesn't, in your opinion, do their job. And don't let others, basically a lot of times it happens when somebody is not doing their job, but you're fixing it for them. They are basically for the higher ups, like, it's working. So unless you say something, nothing will change, because it's working for them and they don't see who puts an effort, and they frankly probably don't care. So don't let people sit on your neck. And that's it for me. I'm surprised I'm pretty punctual on time. If you have any questions, suggestions, objections, feel free. If you somehow still want to work with me, then there is a QR code right there. Yes. That is the way that was like that in Virtuos when I came. I think it's easier to define the difference between 2 than between 3. So basically, seniors are expected to work independently and mentor other people and know how to solve issues, while juniors are not. And then you can compensate for it by having more grades inside each of the what is it? Each of it. I mean, also as I don't know, any names for specialist, mid, or something really like hurts my ear. So I kind of approve it. Yeah, well, you have junior 3 or like senior 1, for instance. So those are your mids, technically. Yes, gentleman was first.
Okay, so one question, you said that you don't believe really too much in second chances, but sometimes the fact that you would need a second chance is actually not on them, it's on you. For example, if they are not motivated, or maybe not even on you, but on the factors that are not really related to the employee. So how do you manage that?
Well, I mean, this claim is purely my experience. So I have like a limited number. I mean, I'm not saying like it's a universal truth. It's just like I had, I mean, I have, what is it? I have, what is it called in statistics? Like I have a test group of less than 10. And in each of these instances, given a second chance, didn't work. So far, it didn't work. I'm still like, we're still giving them, but so far it never been successful. It's just like I'm just being honest with you and saying how it was. I don't know, maybe one day it will work, and then it was worth basically all times when it didn't.
Again, about juniors and seniors. So you still need some subgrade inside juniors and seniors.
Yes, we do have them.
And at first, it will look strange in someone's CV when they for 4 years was a junior and then become a senior. And second, when you hire, you still need to put a new employee in some position on these subgrades. And when you ask simple questions, you just can specify that is junior, but junior where in this subgrades?
Okay.
Don't you deep dive in this?
Okay, so first of all, let's put it like that. That is not the hill I want to die on. So basically, that is the way how it is in Virtuos. I don't have like very strong opinion on that. if it was like 3 grades, I wouldn't mind too much. I wouldn't fight for it. For me, so first, like with a subgrade, as I said, we have some requirements for shipped features. So, for instance, Junior 1 is someone who has absolutely no track record. Junior 3, however, is somebody who did like several like simple features. And besides of that, there is a knowledge matrix. So Junior 1, Junior 3, for instance, know basic concepts very well, and know certain like topics from the advanced and intermediate subjects. So there is that. Then you also you select those grades based on how you perceive this team member. It's like relative gradient. So you give it based on how you perceive this employee will be valuable for your team compared to the ones who are already there. Okay.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for the talk. My question is, how can a senior engineer without assigned direct reports learn about mentoring other junior team members?
He can show initiative, because you don't like senior engineers. They don't have assigned direct reports, so they are not responsible for evaluating employees, for grading them, for performing one-on-ones, etc. Yet they can be proactive, and they can, for instance, they're working on the same project as juniors, and then they can guide them and provide them advice how to work on certain feature. So this is mentoring, but this is not supervising. So the difference between mentoring and supervising basically is that you don't have this formal chain of command, and you don't have this like responsibility to basically grade somebody, like give them tasks and so on and so forth. So anyone can mentor anyone.
Thank you.
Thanks first for the great talk. To be honest, more questions than I expected from here. One thing I wanted to go back about is the sport team comparison. We are not familiar with our sport team. What do you do? Do you have an experience in case when the, let's say, manager of the team becomes the member of the team? Let's say the senior member becomes the manager of the team after X years of something, and basically you have to have the team respect that he's the lead, and basically not abuse that, hey, we are familiar, we are bros, other families or something, like, can you cover for me or something like that? Like when you basically have like somebody's abusing your trust.
I think there is I didn't read this book. I only read a quote. I think it was written by some guy from Intel. So basically, there is a very good test showing that whether your friendship with somebody prevents you from being a good manager or not. Think what would happen if you fire this guy. If your guts inside starts turning over from this thought, then you can't be objective manager.
Thank you.
Right behind you.
So you mentioned technical tests, but what about substituting them for pairing or ensemble programming with that person, so you know better how to work? How do they work?
How do you see this done?
Sorry?
I mean, we have for that we have like there is an evaluation period, like first 3 months, basically by the law, by the labor law, you can both sides can terminate their contract at any time. So this is the time when they have to work with somebody. I mean. Do you expect candidates to code with someone before you hire them?
Yes, that's the
Yeah,
approach.
that will take too much time. I mean that how many hours do you want to invest in it?
1 hour, I think it will be enough.
I don't know. I mean, we have pretty hard problems, and I don't think in 1 hour it's basically will be just ramping you up and explaining you how something is working. Second, we don't do pair programming because we don't have enough resources for that. Everyone needs to perform their tasks, so our team is working at the full capacity.
All right. Thank you very much.
Wait for it.
Can I just one thing about the promotion? I get reminded how to handle situation when everybody's aboard on promoting somebody from your team, basically, but the board is basically going like, not right now, not budget, and it's basically delaying. How to expose that situation to that somebody like, you know what? Don't get demotivated. You're gonna get there. It's just like it's out of my hands right now.
Can you? So basically, you have a team member worthy of promotion. Everyone sees that they should be promoted, but somebody who's distributing money in your company, that being a general manager or whoever, says they couldn't make it right now, right?
Yes, exactly, and it's just postponed, not once, but.
I mean, this is not something you. I mean, there is no good answer for that. I guess you can always, if you think somebody is not doing their job right, you escalate it to their supervisor. So if this BART person, for instance, is your studio general manager, you first go talk to them. You say, hey, like this guy is really valuable for us. He proved he is performing above this grade. If we don't give him a raise, he'll leave. How are you planning to replace them? If they are still not convinced, you ask the same question to their supervisor.
Thanks.
And then either it gets resolved or not.
I'm really curious, before you said if somebody in the team gets promoted and you said you have this test of like, oh yeah, am I too close to this person to like manage them by like basically checking your gut feeling. So if you realize, oh yeah, like let's say you get like offered, oh yeah, do you want to like manage the team? And then you realize you have a few people where like you don't pass your own gut check, like how would you deal with that? Would you just say, oh, I can't manage these people, or I can't manage it at all, or would you try to work it out, or?
To be honest, I never, I guess I'm like cynical enough, I never ran into that situation. Or like sociopath or whatever, call me whatever you want. Second, I guess, I mean, yeah, that's a hard situation. You can either like recognize your bias and try to do something with that. I guess we had talks like on GIC in the past about like recognizing your biases. There are more knowledgeable people than me to talk about it. If your organization is big enough, probably it will make sense to have this person transferred. I mean, obviously, like you can have, for instance, a supervisor. Supervisor and report relation and the romantic relation at the same time that comes without saying. With a big friendship that prevents you having objective decisions, I guess the same. So, for instance, one thing that you can suggest is that person starts formally reporting to somebody else, for instance, to your supervisor or something, or gets transferred to another team.
Thanks for the answer and thanks for the talk.
And now clap.